Our gambling story today is about Crapless Craps in Bob Stupak, Vegas World. This is the casino that Bob Stupak owned. It opened in 1979, Vegas World. It was in a real bad part of town in Vegas. I mean, it's not a place you really wanted to go to. It was between downtown and the Strip. They called it Naked City. I mean, there were some bad people around there, and this is what it looked like in the early 80s. But you really had to be a carnival barker. You had to be a real showman to even make this place work. So Bob Stupak was really an interesting gentleman, or a gambler. He was a poker player, gambler. He just about did everything. And we're going to talk about Bob Stupak, and we're going to talk about Crapless Craps. We're going to try to get the history down because we need to document it. This is an interesting story. The reason I found Bob Stupak so interesting is because he didn't mind bending or breaking the rules. I mean, this guy was a real renegade from the Ohio River area. He was from Pittsburgh, an Appalachian free spirit who simply did not think or act like other people, or like the so-called normal folks out there. Now, my favorite run-in with the crazy casino owner was one night when I was playing poker down at Binion's. My table was right beside the big game, and there was Doyle Brunson, Chip Reese, and Bob Stupak. And now, early in the evening, there was nothing spectacular about that game going on. I mean, these were big players, big guys, but they were known to hang around the horseshoe, and people just, came and gone, came and went. Nobody really bothered them or anything. And then one time I came back from the restroom, and I look over there, and Bob Stupak's hair is standing straight up like Don King's hair. I mean, that's not the way his hair normally was. I mean, it was. And Bob Stupak was there playing poker like nothing was going on. And everybody acted normal. And Bob's hair is standing straight up. I mean, I'll never forget it. I'll never know if this was some sort of practical joke that he made a bet or he went to the restroom and got wired on coke. I really don't know. But it was just the weirdest thing I ever saw from Bob. And Bob did lots of crazy things. Anyhow, we're going to talk about Crapless Craps Table because Bob says he invented the game. Here's the layout. I mean, Crapless Craps, you don't crap out. If you roll a 2, 3, or 12, that will be your number, and then you will get the true odds. If you roll your number twice, if you roll a deuce, your number's a deuce. If you roll it again, you'll get true odds if you take your odds. Anyhow, it's an interesting game. And Crapless Craps came around somewhere in the early 80s. Now, Vegas World opened up in 1979. Now, right after it opened up, Bob Stupak hired David Slansky as his gambling guru. And a lot of people say, the rumor is that David Slansky is the one who came up with the idea for Crapless Craps, and then Bob Stupak says, he invented it. A lot of people said the game was around a long time before Bob even incorporated it in the casino. So we may never know the truth. But the bottom line is, what we do know, that for legal casinos, Bob Stupak's Vegas World was the first casino to ever have Crapless Craps that I know of, and most people know of. Now, the interesting part of this story, and the reason why I'm going to tell this story, and why it's so interesting, when Bob Stupak incorporated this game into his casino, it's called Crapless Craps. Now, every new game in the casino, you have to go and apply to the Gaming Commission. The Gaming Commission has to approve any new games. So you can imagine that this is not going to go smoothly because Bob Stupak, he wore his craziness like a badge of honor. I mean, this guy was a free spirit, renegade, crazy lunatic, and he took this reputation to the extremes. I mean, later on we'll talk about a story where he acted crazy with the union and the mob. I mean, the guy, that's what he was. He was just crazy. And anyhow, so he's supposed to go and apply for a new game approval through the Gaming Commission. He didn't do that. So a gaming control agent came to the casino and started to talk to Bob. And Bob, you got to do this. You've got to apply. You cannot have a game like this and not apply for it. Well, you need approval from us. And Bob, of course, was crazy and said, I don't have to do that. No, I'm not. Get out of here. I'm not going to do that. And finally, after multiple meetings with this gaming control agent, and the shit had basically hit the fan here, Bob Stupak came up with a great idea. I guess he did his homework, and he said, I don't have to apply for a new game because this game's already on the books. It's called The Big Engine. And the gaming control agent looked at him like, what? What the hell? Big Engine? Yeah, Bob said, yeah. Big Engine was approved back in, I don't know, it was like the late 30s or early 40s, but a long, long time ago. There was a game called Big Engine. It had already been approved, and basically that's what the game I'm playing. Now, Bob was bluffing. I tell you, I mean, really. I mean, you gotta love this guy. He's a poker player. He's trying to bluff the Gaming Control Commission. The game, he almost pulled this bluff off, but the gaming control agent, he just would not give up. He had to go back and research this Big Engine because Big Engine was not even being played now. Big Engine was this game that was played, 30, 40 years ago, and a long time ago. Nobody knew who it was. So, but the gaming control agents did not give up. They finally located he was a congressman or a senator up in Reno, and he was actually he was one of the first people on the Gaming Control Commission. He must have been in his 80s or something, and they contacted this senator or congressman, and they said, did you know about the Big Engine, that game a long time ago? It was approved by you guys back in the day. And sure enough, this politician says, yeah, I remember Big Engine. We approved it. Nobody plays it anymore, but it was a card game. It was a game where they dealt cards. And Bob Stupak's bluff was busted. It was like a busted flush draw. I mean, they called his bluff, but you got to give him. I mean, that's the beauty of this guy, Bob Stupak, this renegade lunatic who's going to pull a bluff on the gaming control agents, and he says, "Yeah, Big Engine's already approved. That's my game." Blah blah blah. And I thought that was a great story. And finally, Bob Stupak had to submit the right paperwork, and the game got approved. But I mean, this is like old-time American revolutionary types. They just want to bend or break the rules, and you see this a lot in the old poker players too. Poker players taking shots here. They call it angle shooting, and it's just what they did back in the day. It wasn't really cheating, but it was Captain Kirk bluffing type, bending the rules, and that's why I found this guy so interesting. And plus, he was a good poker player. He loved to play poker down the horseshoe. Bob Stupak was the first guy who played against a computer. Bob Stupak had a big way. I think it was in the 70s or 80s. Bob Stupak played a computer, poker. I'm pretty sure he beat the computer back then. And yes, I did work at the Stratosphere. I did work the Crapless Craps table. It was one of my last jobs in the business before I gave it up. I mean, but here's something to think about. When I worked there, it was probably about 20 years ago, silver was about $5 an ounce, okay? 20 years ago, back then. Today, I know a few people who work there today, and they're making about the same amount of money that I made 20 years ago, but now silver is almost $18 an ounce, and now you know how the Federal Reserve banking cartel kills us through inflation. Now, okay, when I worked at the Stratosphere, this was after Carl Icahn had bought it. So I did not actually work for Bob Stupak. Everybody knows who Carl Icahn is, or I hope you do. I mean, Carl Icahn is the guy who went from billionaire to super billionaire the day that Donald Trump was elected. If you want to know what those tweets are about, if you want to know why Donald Trump is tweeting so much and they look like crazy tweets, is because for the first 2 years, Carl Icahn would short a stock and Donald Trump would talk shit. He'd tweet out something bad about a company that Carl Icahn had shorted. And then the next thing you know, a week later, Donald Trump is tweeting something good about the company. And of course, Carl Icahn had changed over, went along with it. Make a long story short, this went on for the first 2 years that Donald Trump was president. Carl Icahn and a few other guys got rich because they know each other. It's a matrix. It's a club. It's a club, and you and I are not in it. Matter of fact, Carl Icahn made so much money the first 2 years that Donald Trump was president that he was able to accumulate 30% of Caesar's Palace stock. And the reason why Caesar's Entertainment had to sell is because Carl Icahn bought up all their stock and forced them to sell. We're talking big league here. Now, okay, if you're going back 20 years ago, Carl Icahn would come to Las Vegas and he would play in the big game at the Mirage with Doyle Brunson and Chip Reese. I mean, millions changed hands there at the big game at the Mirage, and I think a little later maybe at the Bellagio. But after the big game and after Carl Icahn left town, then Doyle Brunson and Chip Reese would then go over to the Stratosphere and they would play Crapless Craps for some serious money. Okay, it's a small world indeed if you can read between the lines there. Okay, so that's about all I know about Crapless Craps and the history of it. I thought that was an interesting story, him trying to bluff the gaming control board. But let's go ahead and talk about some other basic history of Bob Stupak. Like I said, he opened up Vegas World in 1979. He did not have that big of a bankroll. And he got into trouble sometimes, and the cage would run short of money, and he would have to go down and get a loan from Benny Binion. That Benny Binion was the guy downtown that you could get money from. All the guys on the strip, the casino owners on the strip, if they ran into problems, they called up Benny, and Benny Binion said, "Meet me down at the cage." And Bob Stupak would do that. He would go down to the cage at the Horseshoe, and then he would take back brown bags full of money to make sure they had enough money to handle any gamblers, because one gambler did come in and almost put a hurting on Bob Stupak. He had a big run on the dice table. So let's talk about what happened in the beginning. When he first opened up Vegas World, he did not really have that big of a bankroll, and the unions came in and tried to muscle him, and they tried to extort him for money, and they put up, they were picketing out front. Bob Stupak actually challenged the union officials. Say, listen, your union boss comes over here and plays tic-tac-toe with this rooster. Bob had a rooster. It was trained in a carnival how to play tic-tac-toe. And Bob says, if your union boss can beat my rooster playing tic-tac-toe, then I'll go ahead and sign your union members up. If not, then you guys hit the road. And anyhow, this was Bob Stupak's thing. He was like crazy. Same thing happened after the union. The union people had to leave. A judge ordered the union picketers to leave. Now the mafia came in and tried to muscle him. And Bob Stupak took the same routine. Crazy guy. Like, we're going to meet at the coffee shop. Can I bring a gun? Blah, blah, blah. Bug-eyed. I mean, it got around really quick that Bob Stupak was just one crazy son of a bitch. It doesn't surprise me at all, because most of the people from the Ohio River and the Pittsburgh area are crazy people. Again, that doesn't surprise me at all. And I also tell the story that at the time that Bob Stupak opened up here in '79, most of all the casino managers on the Strip were from Steubenville, Ohio. Now, Steubenville was just down the river from Pittsburgh. Everybody knows that Dino Crocetti, a.k.a. Dean Martin, was from Steubenville. And it was a big illegal gambling town in Steubenville. So that's why those guys fit in great here in Vegas, because, they were dealing dice in Steubenville a long time before Vegas even opened up. So let's take a look here at some of the other things. Bob Stupak also paid a guy $1 million to jump off his building. I think that guy's name was Dan Coco. In 1984, Dan Coco jumped off the building, and Bob paid him $1 million. He expanded to 25 floors in 1983, and of course we know that Vegas World shut down in '95 so they could build the Stratosphere. When I worked there, it was the Stratosphere. And they had a fire. But Bob Stupak's career in the casino business, he had lots of fires. And even in the Stratosphere, they had a fire at the top, and the insurance had to pay for it. I don't know. It just seems like there's a lot of fires with Bob Stupak in his buildings. But finally, it says here, Carl Icahn bought the place. And then Carl sold, in 2007, Goldman Sachs was involved. And we cannot leave out the time that Bob Stupak ran for mayor of Las Vegas, and he gave away TV sets if you would vote for him. Well, he did lose.